Hey everybody, welcome back to another My Complete Health Talk. This week we're going to change gears here and talk a little bit more about the spiritual side of everything. A lot of people know that like I'm a Christian and that I hold the Bible in very high regard, and I hold Jesus, the one true God, and then the Holy Spirit in extremely high regard. But I have some very unique perspectives on the Bible and what is actually happening because of my background early on as a student and everything. So we'll get into that. And I just wanted to share some of that with you because this week has been rough on a lot of people. There's a lot of evil people out there right now that are really doing their best to pump up fear, anxiety, and doubt, and then they're putting the frequencies out there on top of that. So a lot of people know that, I do a lot of frequency medicine here at the clinic, and we get a lot of fantastic results from it. Everybody just loves it. Well, I always tell them, if I have that stuff here, what do the bad guys have? And what are they putting out? And so we're not going to be talking about that here, but I just think that this is good to have as a foundational idea of what is actually happening and what the whole point is going on here. So this is going to be what I suspect is going to be a large multi-part series as more questions come in, and we need to talk about more and more of this stuff in a non-churchy, non-club Christian, as I like to call it, perspective. So this is the God Who Is There, part one. And then medical disclaimer, although this isn't a medical talk, I like to just put the disclaimer out there. So it's like, this website presentation does not provide medical advice. Don't take my advice for anything for as treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any question you may have regarding a medical condition, treatment, and before undertaking new healthcare regimen, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you've read on this website or on the internet or in a video that you've watched. So this is going to be, I can't, I was going to start out by saying this is probably going to be short, but it may or may not be. So let's just see how me talking to myself actually works out. So the God Who Is There intro. Things we're going to cover is Genesis and the foundation of our reality, the electron double slit experiment, light and the properties of light, dimensionality and why it matters, the need for Jesus from a modern perspective, and then Bible codes. And again, we're not going to talk about any single one of these in detail because you can get your PhD in literally every single one of these categories. What we're going to do is mainly touch on them so that you understand the 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 largeness, how large all of these things are, and if we can kind of put them together, you can see that there's actually a lot more going on than what you're being told on the nightly news on YouTube, or even from a lot of these so-called like alternative news sites that are actually just funded by the same people anyway. So the creation story. So Genesis, the beginning of everything. So, what's interesting about the creation story of the Bible is that it's unique among all the creation stories. Now, because of my liberal arts degree, we had to learn about all these other religions and everything like that. And there might be there might be merits to other religions in that they have tacits or properties of them that would be good moralistically speaking, but none of them actually start with how you would actually build a universe from scratch, except Genesis from the Torah or the Old Testament for, modern Christianity. So let's just read it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So now we got the heavens and the earth. Okay. So now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. We don't have time to get into it, but the darkness, Spirit of God, and hovering over the waters are not translated very well. So a lot of people take those as surface level English words, and they're not. They actually, like, you could, if you wanted to, get your PhD in that whole sentence, and people have. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light, was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. And there was evening and there was the morning, and that was the first day. So that was the first day. So nothing happened. Like the earth wasn't. So what happened was is that God created the universe. He put the stuff in there. He created. Now the earth was formless and empty. So the heavens and the earth were there, but the formlessness and the emptiness was is that there was no reference. And we're not talking, and a lot of people say, oh, well, you need light to see things. Or oh, I get it, there's written. No, it's even deeper than that. There was no way for a consciousness to know or interact with this new realm, this new universe, because there was no unit of reference of the universe. It's like, how do you know how to get somewhere? Well, you need a map or directions. Then your directions are always going to be referencing something that is there. But if you don't have a map and you have no way to reference the thing that is there, you can't get anywhere, and you're just going to be blind to wherever it is that you're going. Now imagine that, but on a universal cosmic perspective to the very core of everything. There was no way that you could get around. There's no way to navigate in this newly created space until there was a reference medium, which is light, or what we would refer to it as the electromagnetic spectrum. But that's problematic in and of itself because light goes far beyond that. The electromagnetic spectrum, is that part of the light frequencies? Yes. It's only part. It's not the whole. Light goes far beyond that. So then we come to our first point about all of this. The only thing that evil can do is cause you to doubt. Okay, so we have been at war, and we have been. My personal, not even opinion, but my personal perspective on the whole matter is that we have been at war for at least 6,000 years. I would say probably longer, with evil that has hijacked this corner of the universe. But they only have the one weapon. I've been telling everybody that evil is very clever, but they're not very smart. Okay, so the one weapon is to get you to doubt. So if they can get you to doubt this beginning, and I'm pointing to the screen, like you can actually see me point to it, but if they can get you to doubt the whole first day, this whole first line of Genesis, then doubting the apostles, doubting Jesus, doubting salvation, doubting the rest of the Bible, it's easy. Because if this doesn't work, so if you supplant this with like various Big Bang stuff, or like expanding universe model, or like evolution, we're from single-celled nothing to something, and it was all chance, it was all random, we're all just space dust that came together and happened to form this, then the rest of it is just a fairy tale, and you're going to dismiss it. Okay, so most people don't understand how light works or that it's intelligent, so we're going to talk about that very briefly. And in order to do that, we're going to have to look into the electron double slit experiment. So to understand the intelligence of light, we have to look at something more simple, which is the electrons. So this experiment took place in 1927 and used an electron beam to shoot particles at a plate, a metal plate. And guys, like this, I tried to find some more interesting visuals for this, but this is literally like, imagine a flashlight, and you shine a flashlight up against basically a sheet of tin foil that has two slits in it, and then there's another sheet of paper on the backside so that you can see a reflection. Now, they weren't using a flashlight, they were using an electron gun, and then the plate was actually a charged particle plate, but that's the setup. So really, it's immaterial, the setup. The results are what actually matters. And so the results, are, you go on Wikipedia and everything, they're going to show that, they're going to say it's like, oh, it shows the properties that both light has properties of waves and particles, and it's, goes to like Einstein's famous E equals mc squared came out of some of these experiments and everything. Now, the more interesting thing, that's all true and that's all very interesting, but the thing that should, if you fully understand it, should shake you to your very core and make you scared for the reality around you, And if it doesn't, you don't understand this. And that's okay, because not everybody, I tell everybody, it's like, listen, if you fully understand this stuff, you're going to be sitting on the other side of the desk with me, and you're almost better off not knowing this stuff. But here we are, and we're going to attempt to explain this. Now, you would expect that with two slits, half of the electron beam would go in one slit and the other half would go on the other slit. So it's just split. It would be like you're literally just splitting the beam, or if you had water, you'd be splitting the stream. What they found was that all of the electrons went through both slits at the same time with equal distribution. I'm going to say that again, because if you just nodded your head and said, okay, you didn't hear me and you didn't understand it. We found that all the electrons went through both slits at the same time with equal distribution. So that means that if you had one electron, it went through both slits at the same time, which means it occupied 2 points of space-time at the same time and then came back together and coalesced at the same time. And if you're still nodding your head and saying, okay, and you're not saying, whoa, 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 wait a second, you still don't understand what I'm talking about. So you're going to have to listen to this again and again and again, but you'll finally, it's a visualization exercise. How can one finite particle occupy 2 points of space-time at the same time? But that's what happened, and that's what they found. We also know later that orbital models of atoms, and you can look this up, it's called the electron cloud theory, and anybody that's gone through chemistry knows the electron cloud model, or the electron cloud theory model, but they have what's known as nodal points in the orbits of the electrons, and the electrons don't simply just go around these nodal points, it's like it continues in orbit. They hit the nodal point, and then they appear on the other side. Let me say that again. The electron is spinning around, and you can't know, because of the uncertainty principle, where it's going to be in this cloud, but they do know that when it goes through this nodal point, that it doesn't actually go through the nodal point. It goes to the nodal point and then just appears on the other side of the nodal point and continues with the whole electron cloud thing. So the electron skips that area of space-time because it doesn't want to go through it for some reason. Okay, and then when I asked it, it's like, does this prove teleportation and everything? Because I was in high school, and they were like, no, what are you talking about? Kind of does, but we won't get into that. Okay, so the skipping, the skipping of the nodal point can and will, if you want to take it that far, it makes you go down a very deep rabbit hole that once you fully understand it, you're not going to have the same grasp of reality anymore. But that's not even the craziest part that they found out about light. That's just an aside, okay? What they actually found out was that light is not infinite, okay? So what I mean by that is that you would expect, so if this was, everybody thinks that this reality that we have is an analog reality, in which case you can take, let's say you take like a ruler and then you can cut it in half, and you cut that in half, and you cut that in half, and you cut that, and you can do that to infinity, and you're just going to have an infinitely small ruler at some point. It's going to be half of an infinite number of halves. You can't do that. And a lot of people find that they just say, oh, well, that makes sense. There's got to be some limit. The problem is that then that talks about the digital nature of our reality. So light, the smallest, so it's like you can take a big group of light, so like a bunch of photons, and then you can reduce that to what is a single particle of light known as a quanta, okay? And then that, if you cut that quanta in half, again, you don't have half of a quanta, okay? Because it's digital. This is a digital world. This is a digital universe that we are in. You have, it now ceases to become light, and it just becomes a form of pure energy, but that energy, which is, I guess you could still classify it as light, occupies all points of space-time at the same time until it is then referenced again. And then it will bounce into our reality, and it will, it's like I'm looking at the chairs in front of my desk here. Well, I wasn't, I was looking at the screen, but now that I'm looking at the chairs, now that light knows that I need to reference these chairs, and it's coming back to show me that reference model. Okay? So, um, this is why God said we needed light, because there's no way to reference the space that he created before that. And so the without form and void, now that I'm remembering, is the Hebrew for tohu and bohu, which means um, without form. It's basically an infinite vacuum. So if you want to look up tohu and bohu and like that, that's what you're looking for. Those are the translated Hebrew terms. Um, Yes. Well, without getting too far into that rabbit hole, let's move on. Um, in the 1970s, so let's talk about dimensional reality for a second, which was one of my hobbies in high school. So in the 1970s, we spent millions and millions of dollars smashing particles together to learn that there were 10 dimensions of space-time, 3 of which were directly measurable and 7 that can only be inferred. And that's incidentally what CERN over in Europe, the big particle collider that was supposed to end the world like a few years ago, that's what they're trying to do, is punch holes in reality. Oh, spoiler alert, they actually did it, but then because they did it in the future and there was an echo, there was a pre-echo, they figured out that they couldn't do it because something, and I quote, something from the future was preventing them from doing it in the present. And you can look that up. And if that doesn't scare the crap out of you, I don't know what will in this talk. So anyway, so there's 10 dimensions, 3 of which are directly measurable and 7 which can be only inferred, which means that you can only indirectly measure them. So 3 of our dimensions, length, height, width, the 4th being time, and then 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way on up, okay? In the 10th century, there is a rabbi scholar, I believe his name was Nachmanides, and he was studying Genesis, and he came to the conclusion that there were 10 heavens, and 3 of which were directly knowable, and 7 that were not directly knowable or indirectly knowable. And that's from studying Genesis in the Hebrew. Okay, so there you go. So we spent millions of dollars in the 70s to figure out what we already knew, what the Bible already told us. Okay, so what does this have to do with you? Well, it's in the folding of the dimensions, okay? Because the Holy Spirit told me, because I was asking about this a lot, because my big thing is like, okay, I know I know that God is God. I know that God is there, but my thing is that where was he? Where was God? And it's an interesting question to ask, because a lot of people are like, oh, God's infinite, God's this, God's that. And it's like, yes, he is that, but he has to be someplace. And if the answer is everywhere, then that's what I wanted to know. Now, what he did tell me was that, or he more showed me, and was more annoyed with it, which is an interesting tone to get from God, but whatever, um, was that you have to think of each dimension like it's a box, okay? So it's like your average Amazon box. And then, so it's like if you've got the first dimension, and then that's a box, and then you put it into the second dimension, which is another box. But every time you put that box into another box, it becomes flat or planar flat. And then you just keep doing that. So it's like the second box, the second dimension goes into the third box, and the third one goes into the fourth, and so on until you get all the way up to the 10th. And so all of these dimensions are inside of each other. And if you actually look at geometric representations of like hypercubes, so either fourth or fifth or sixth dimensional hypercubes, they literally look like boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes, okay? And they're dimensionally folded into themselves. Now, some people have it is said that the people that can really work with hyper instances or hypercubes are the like very learned, or the people that have PhDs in that, and then small children. Okay, and that's because it's a visualization process. You just have to accept that it is the way that it is, and you understand the realities intrinsic to that particular platform. And it's incredibly hard to articulate that out. It's something that you just have to basically sit there, and it's like kind of watching waves on the ocean. After a while, you just kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. All right. And so it's a very worthwhile exercise because once you get it, you're going to get reality. All right. So what we can draw from it that is a little bit more concrete than uh, being Zen on the ocean is that God occupies the highest dimension. Okay. But by occupying the highest dimension, he has access and can manipulate and is through all of the lesser dimensionalities. But because he can do that, he's actually closer to you. It has greater access to you than somebody else that's just sitting on your lap. And in fact, because of the curvature of space-time, if somebody stuck their hand directly into yourself somehow, he would still be closer than that person because of the interfolding um, of the dimensions on themselves. And so when God says, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you, that's because he has access to you in all points of space-time because he's higher than all points of, he's bigger than all of the points of space-time because all space-time is inside of him. So a lot of people have this really weird understanding. They think that there's the universe in and of itself, like, there's like this bubble, thought bubble that is the universe, and then God is another extra thought bubble outside of the universe, and he kind of checks in on the universe that he made. That's not true on any sense. So you got to think about it as concentric rings, where God in and of himself is the largest ring, and then the universe is a ring inside of that, and that our galaxy is a ring inside of that, and then inside that ring is our Earth, and then inside of that ring is you. So that's why I say that we're in this really weird slip space bubble to a lot of people. We're in a bubble. We were never meant to be this far away from God, but we are because of this whole predicament that we're in. Okay. So conclusion from the last slide is that God is pretty much right in front of your nose, but you can't see him. God of the universe is right there, but you can't see him because we're separated from him because of the dimensions and the dimensional bubble that we're in. So this leads us to the need for Jesus from a modern perspective, which it's not really a modern perspective, but I just didn't have a better way to say it. It's more of like a modern translation of it. So there's immense debate on how old the Earth is. Are humans from Earth? Is the Garden of Eden here, etc.? Those are very provocative, very interesting. Some of it might actually be true, but at the end of it, like my normal Christians right now are just losing their heads. They're losing their brains are exploding that I would even include that in a lecture on God. But the fact of the matter is that there is pretty interesting evidence from older, what would be considered non-canonical books, even though Jesus quotes them himself. So whatever. So I figure, until we know for sure, they're provocative debates, okay? But what we do know for sure, what is true and what we can prove is that we have been in a prison for the last 6,000 years that has been actively cut off from the rest of creation, okay? We can look out, but we can't go anywhere, okay? And we've been taken into this prison planet for the last 6,000 years or more by a death cult that has been led by Moloch, Baal, Marduk, and Satan, okay? Those Lucifer, the son of the morning, the fallen angel. All of these big baddies and a lot of people oh, they're very afraid of Satan. It's like, oh, he's the biggest, baddest one. He's really not, people. Really, the guy leading the show is Moloch, okay? And wait, in the Old Testament talks about Moloch a lot. And if you really want to understand what evil is actually controlling the world, you're going to do your research into Moloch, and we might actually do that later. But I don't have anything off the cuff ready for that. But he's basically the hands of Moloch, and he takes the form of a bull or an owl. So if anybody knows anything about Bohemian Grove out in California, then you'll know that that's an owl. That's Moloch. And basically Moloch requires sacrifice, and he requires sacrifice of children very specifically. And what they do, what the worshippers of Moloch would do is that they would take their firstborn child in the spring, and then they would take this bronze statue of Moloch with outstretched hands. They would light a fire underneath that, or sometimes it'd be really fancy. They would actually have the fire in the base of the statue that would heat the brass or bronze hands up like a griddle, like a grill, and then you'd put your child on that and you'd cook him. You'd literally grill your children, okay? And I'm going to say that again. Moloch requires the sacrifice of your children. So everybody's like, where are all of these hundreds of thousands or millions of children going around the world? They're going to him. They're being sacrificed to him in one way or another, all right? And it has not stopped. Planned Parenthood, millions and millions and millions of children aborted every year. They're going to him, all right? And so what we are fighting for is a battle against him, Baal, Marduk, and Satan. All right, and you have to understand that. Do your research on these things. And in fact, do your research on everything that I talk about in here, because we are in this really weird state that anybody from a central authority figure that has any modicum of authority, no one questions anything. All right, I used to cite my sources to no end. Like I used to have hundreds of citations on all of my like scientific papers and everything. No one read them because everybody's like, well, he's the expert. He's standing up there. He's giving the presentation. So like it's got to be true, right? So if you're thinking a lot of this stuff is crazy, or you're just like, oh, Ian's crazy, death cult, Moloch, Baal, Marduk. I've only ever read about Satan in the Bible. Do your research. The information's out there. All you got to do is let it in. So moving on, without digression, moving on, because of their machinations, Moloch, Baal, Marduk, and Satan, we're stuck in this bubble, okay? And we've been separated from God, okay? And we've been so separated from God that he had to send himself in his son Jesus to tell us about him so that we could have a choice to choose him. Previously, we did not have a choice. We didn't know enough about the God that created us, which you want to think about that for a second. How could the universe be created by an infinite God, and that God hide himself from creation that he created? It just doesn't make any sense unless something was blocking him from doing it. And then there's a lot of people out there who would be like, how could that happen if he's infinite and all this other stuff? Well, he's also very respectful, and I don't have all the answers on that, but I do know that we've been cut off from him. And that's why we needed Jesus, okay? That's why we needed the prophets. That's why we needed people that could actually hear him and tell us about him, Jesus being the chief among them, okay? So the point is that the Most High God of all love, light, and creation is the God of choice. Choose him or don't. It's up to you. But that is your choice. Evil does not give you a choice. It is worship or die. Kneel or die. Give penance or die. Give your firstborn or die. And so whenever you have and you know what we call that? Fascism. Okay? So follow us or die. Follow us or get your head bashed in. So I could go on and on, but that is evil. And that is from the four big baddies up on top. So Jesus came and pierced the bubble that we are in and gave us a choice and showed us that we could win. And that's why he injected, legally speaking, his power back into this bubble of space that we're in. And we can draw on that power if we draw through him, because there's a legal precedence to do that. Okay, and there's a lot of great Bible scholars that actually talk about that legal preference, but this is just another way to say it so that you can break this whole stranglehold on your mind. So the Bible codes. Um, some people like Bible codes, some people find them disturbing. I just say what it is that they are. So what we need to know is that all war is deception. This is why in the book of Enoch it said that the fallen angels taught man the art of war. What they actually did, everybody thinks, oh, man didn't know how to like fight or hit or kill or do any of that. Maybe, maybe not. But what he didn't know how to do was lie. Lying was taught to us, and it was taught through the art of war. All war is deception. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, all war is deception. Deception is war. So that is lying or obfuscating the truth or hiding the truth. Do you really want your enemy to know how big your forces are? No, you're going to lie. You're going to somehow make them seem bigger or smaller. That's what you're going to do. So we are in the Fourth World War right now. The Third World War was actually the fall of the Soviet Union, which I've been saying we're the Third World War. I was actually corrected, and it's from a historical perspective, it's like, yeah, they're absolutely right. But the Fourth World War is for your mind. It is not for your body. It is not for like there's very little bullets being shot right now, at least as far as we know. But what do we know? We don't know anything because the news isn't the news anymore and history isn't history. It's all been screwed up. So you can give in to fear and doubt and panic, or this should be or you can follow God. So many people say you can't prove God, and I feel like, well, I think I just did that, but okay, let's go a step further. So the Bible has what are known as equal letter distant codes running from the front to the back, or the Bible codes, and you can look them up. And they basically tell the story of Jesus, and there's one that actually says like to the effect that Jesus is Lord, going from like spread out from the Genesis to Revelation and then back again. And a lot of people ask me, it's like, okay, well, if you're saying that, and it's my personal contention that there are missing books from the Bible. Now, a lot of people say, how can that happen? Because it says God put the decree out there and you're not going to change one letter of this book. And they didn't. So again, going back to evil is very clever, but they're not very smart. So God knew that they would just say, okay, we're just going to remove a bunch of books. And it's my personal opinion that there's 777 books and that they're stored in the Vatican, and we're going to get them fairly soon. So we'll figure out what's going on. But one thing that I'll leave all of my more regular Christians with is that, okay, if God's number is all sevens, so 7 times 7 is 49, 7 weeks, 70th weeks, 7 is the perfect number. We can all agree on that. Why are there 66 books? It's what I thought. So the conclusion. We are at war. We've always been at war. The war is for your mind. Moloch eats and consumes children. God wins the war because he says that he wins. He says that he does. Even if he's not winning, he just say, okay, I won, and then he won. Because he creates the reality. He is the universe. He is it. He is. That's it. The one who is self-created. And some people ask me, okay, well, if he's created this bubble, what's outside him? I don't know, and I don't care. That's way above my pay grade. One thing that I do know is that we're rapidly closing in on the end of the war, and that is why the fight for your mind is intensifying to basically levels of insanity that we've never seen before. If you get into doubt right now, you will spiral out of control and they will have won the fight for your mind. That's the bottom line. If you allow yourself to give in to fear, doubt, and panic, they have you. And you may not be able to come back from it. Okay? Just a thought. I do know that the Bible is very clear that your body is a temple, and they have been trying to destroy that temple with their chemical poisons. You need to work to restore it. You can see all the other videos that we have about restoring your health and mind, and we have some very good protocols for that. So, again, this was a little bit more interesting of a talk. Is certainly not one of our nutritional or chemistry discussions on anything, but I feel like with everything that's going on, it was just as pertinent, and just as necessary, because if you look at our business card, it says one of the tenets is spiritual, and that's what we are attempting to do. So again, though, it's like if you don't like some of the terminology that I used on here, that's fine, because a lot of quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes right now, Christians don't actually like that, especially the more fundamentalist Christians. But the reality is that these terminologies might make you feel uncomfortable, but they're there in the Bible. And if you actually think about it, it's like, okay, we believe in a book that was written not by us, not by people, but by the Holy Spirit. And you say the Holy Spirit like, oh yeah, it's just the Holy Spirit, but is really the Spirit, that or entity that is non-corporeal, that roams the earth, that will inspire people to do good and listens to you and is the bridge to the Most High God of the universe. And then that God sent his son down to save us from sin. What is sin? Most people don't have a great answer to that. And then all of the other quote unquote magical things that happen, but because they were in the Bible and you grew up with them, now you're comfortable with them. So there you go. I mean, if you actually take the Bible at face value, it is an extremely strange book. I happen to think that it's 100% true, okay? But it's extremely strange. So I hope that I've added a certain level of perspective onto it. If you would like to tell me what you think, good or bad, just light that keyboard up and see where it goes. All right. I gotta go, guys. I will hopefully see you next week.